Hello, I'm Dell with Healing Frequencies Music, and I am here to do part 3 of the Frequencies of Creation. If you have not yet watched part 1 and 2, make sure you click on the link below to go to the blog post for part 3. And at the beginning of that blog post are all of the links to parts 1 and 2 and all of the sources that I quote in this particular session. I'm not putting anything but the link to part 3 below this video. All of the other links will be within the post itself. So anyway, I've got my cheat sheet and I'm ready to start here with this. So I'm going to jump right into the new stuff. You can read the post for the synopsis and all the other little things. I'm going to speak first about Susan Alexander. I think that's how she says her name. It's spelled differently than I've seen the name Alexander. She wrote an article called The Infrared Frequencies of DNA Bases, Science and Art. And she worked with a biologist named Dr. David Deamer, and he measured the vibrational frequencies of the 4 DNA base molecules and then translated that into sound. I put a link to that article in the blog post. And if you go in there and you scroll down, you can see the exact frequencies for each of the DNA base molecules in a picture. Then what she does is further down, she takes a keyboard, like a piano keyboard, and then puts little dots on it to show where those notes fit on a keyboard. And the first time I looked at it, it was a little confusing because they're all microtonal, meaning they're smaller than a half step. A half step is like a black key to a white key. So for example, C sharp to D, that's a half step, or what we call a minor second. And you all probably recognize this one. That's the Jaws theme, which is the minor second, which we learned in music theory and ear training to recognize it because of Jaws. So a microtone is anything that is a smaller distance than that normal half step. And a lot of the notes in the DNA bases are going to be swimming around. If you remember yesterday, or not yesterday, in number 2, part 2, I talked about how the Schumann resonances fluctuate from 7.83 or 8.6 hertz up to 16 hertz, and they're constantly fluctuating. So it would only make sense that you're going to see these microtonal differences in the DNA, which I wouldn't be surprised if they're not fluctuating at times. I mean, I can't say that for sure because I'm not a scientist and I'm not the one who did the measurements. Anyway, she comments that these DNA base molecules are based on the F sharp major scale, but she makes another comment that's interesting in that it's more based on the C sharp, which is the 5th note, excuse me, of the F sharp major scale. So in music, I should have had some water before we started, we call that the tonic dominant relationship. So if I'm playing F sharp and I go to the C sharp, that is my perfect 5th. In ear training in college, we learned twinkle, 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 twinkle. That is your perfect 5th. Now, if you remember the harmonic series, since we're in F sharp, let's take F sharp. So partial 1 is F sharp. Partial 2 is F sharp an octave higher. Partial 3 is a perfect 5th higher, which is that C sharp. Those are the most prominent harmonics that you will hear in almost everything, which is probably why what we call the tonic dominant relationship is so strong, because that perfect 5th is one of the most, it's partial 3. It's one of the strongest harmonics that exist. And then above that is the perfect 4th, which is the reversal. It's going from C sharp to F sharp, And in ear training, we learned that is here. Here comes the bride. Can't sing that high anyway. You know, everything I sing is below sea level, middle C. Anyway, that was a bad joke. So when you're looking at these note relationships and seeing that the DNA base molecules are more based on the on the dominant, which is the perfect fifth above your key, which in this case, it's based in the key of F sharp. And that's what she was saying. And she, you know, if you know music theory, then you can look at all the DNA bases and say, oh, these are all notes in the F sharp scale. The F sharp scale is basically most of the black keys. F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, and F sharp. That is your F sharp major scale. And most of the notes that are in the DNA-based molecules fit within that scale. But the emphasis is on the dominant, which is the C sharp. And then that perfect fourth, you know, a lot of classical music, the code at the very end of it, they're going to have it based on the 1, 5, 1, 5, 1, 5. So, you know, you got your 1. So there, you know, that is what our ear hears, and it's settling, and it's like this is the end. And if you're watching orchestras, you see the timpani player in the background doing the 1, 5, 1, 5, just to really emphasize the strength of that chord progression. Chord progression is when you're moving from one chord to the next to another chord, so you have a progression of chords that feel settling. That tonic dominant relationship is very strong, and we see it in our DNA, which I just throw that out there. I don't understand why. I don't necessarily have to yet. So that leads me to the Great Pyramid. There is a YouTuber, and I put a link to that also, not below, but in the blog post that's posted below. He's called the Y-Files. And he has a YouTube video called Tesla Knew the Secret of the Great Pyramid, Unlimited Energy to Power the World. And what I love about this guy is he has a whole bunch, every video that he ever found information from, he literally puts in the description below. And he said a couple of things in that video that were slightly confusing, but when you're not a musician, it's easy to... He was saying, well, the King's Chamber plays the F sharp major chord, but then he talks about A being in the Grand Gallery. I'm like, well, that's not an F sharp major chord. So I had to go watch all the videos to figure out what he was talking about. And there are several acoustical scientists who've been to the Great Pyramid, and I'll let you find that out by going and watching the videos yourself. And once they measured it, what they realized is that you have the Grand Gallery, which kind of goes up like this, and they had resonators that were all the way up the Grand Gallery, so that when the air or sound moved, it could enforce it and make it resonate more, and then it drops down into the base of the King's Chamber. Then it's kind of tall, and then up above the King's Chamber, they have all these slabs of granite that are really smooth on the bottom and rough on the top. And no one could figure out why they were there. But then when the acoustical scientists left their recording equipment in there and just got real quiet, you can hear an ambient sound in the gallery, in the Grand Gallery leading up to the King's Chamber. Long story short is the Grand Gallery resonates an A above middle C. This A right here, 440 hertz. Then inside the King's Chamber, so it goes from the A floats up the Grand Gallery, goes into the bottom of the King's Pyramid, and at the very top of the King's Pyramid, then it's the F sharp chord. So if you think about, you have this coming in, and all of a sudden So you're going to hear that A as soon as you hear the F sharp chord. So I'm going to play it again. So here's the A by itself. And then all of a sudden you hear this. Whoops. So you're hearing it as an F sharp minor triad flowing into an F sharp major triad, which I thought is extremely interesting. Now remember I talked about, I believe it was starting in the first one, how major and minor thirds are in the name of Yahweh and Yeshua, along with the minor second. Because Yod He Shin, there's your half step, your minor second, up to the major third, back down to the minor third. So in this one, you've got all these, you've got the half step that goes from F sharp minor to F sharp major, making it a minor third to the major third, the first interval. The interesting thing is most all chords, the first three notes of a chord, are all going to be based on major and minor thirds. If it's a major chord, the first interval is major, and the second interval is minor. So major chords, the first interval is a major third, the second interval is a minor third. Okay, now in minor chords, it's reversed. The first interval is a minor third, and the second interval is a major third. So really what it does is it flips. Now, of course, when you add sevenths and ninths and 11ths and 13s and all those funky jazz chords, that changes everything. So we're talking about your basic chord structure. That all chords, your bass chords, are made up of major and minor thirds. And I find that rather fascinating because we keep seeing this recurring theme throughout. Now, you remember I said in part 2 that even though Yod He Vav He, or Yod He Shin Vav He and Yod He Vav He are on different notes, they still have a relation to the F sharp chord because all keys are related when you go around that circle of fifths, or I played you the circle of fourths because I went the other direction. So there's a relational thing that occurs between chord structures. So that doesn't, I'm not concerned that those notes are different, but the fact that you have major and minor thirds, which seem to really rule everything in music, followed by the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth, and all of those outline the first 6 harmonics in the harmonic series. So again, partial 1 is your fundamental. That's what, and that fundamental pitch is made up of all these others I'm about to play. So partial 2, octave higher. Partial 3, perfect fifth higher. There's your dominant, tonic dominant relationship. Partial 4, perfect fourth. Partial 5, major third. And see, this is where your chord is. And then partial 6 is your minor third. If I just play partials 4, 5, and 6, listen to what I get. There's my major chord. So partials 4, 5, and 6 are playing the major chord, which is built up of major and minor thirds. So that is another reason why those chords are extremely important and why they seem to feel very natural to us. And to think that you are seeing this in human DNA, you are seeing it in the name of God, the name of Yeshua. So the name of God is Yahweh in Hebrew, and then Yeshua is the Christ in Hebrew. The other thing that I found interesting, and I don't think I mentioned this, and this will be the last thing I'll mention here, there's the Kodály method of teaching elementary music. The fascinating thing is for kindergartners and first graders and kids that are learning to sing, the very first interval that they teach is the minor third. And you think, what? It is the easiest interval to sing. And you hear it, na 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 na, na 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 na. And they have all these cutesy little songs that are in the interval of the minor third. Little Tommy Tucker, I can't remember all the words, but almost all children's songs at that age are based on the minor third. So who would think that inherently it's easiest to sing that interval, which is the first interval that came out of the sound of creation, that then morphs, so that minor third then morphs into the major third, which is the voice of Yeshua. So you got a lot of things that are starting to add up here, and you just have to go, what does it all mean? So I'm going to leave you with that thinking for this session. And I know that next session we're going to look at shapes and how that connects into all this. And there'll be a couple other surprises as well. So we'll see you next time for all the fun about the wonderful scale of F sharp.